lovely friends, it's Margaret, and it is time to talk about what I read in February. February was a pretty good reading month for me. You will see that when we get into the stats. I finally had a 5-star read for 2020. Took me long enough. And then I read a lot of books. I read a lot of books, and I'm gonna try and get through those in a reasonable amount of time instead of taking forever like I did last month and giving you a 37-minute video or 47-minute video. It was a long video, and I apologize for that, and we're gonna try and keep that from happening again, okay? Okay. So if you watch my TBR or you follow me on Twitter, link in the description by the way, you would know that I participated in 2 readathons for February. I participated in a blackathon and in Valentine's. I had so much fun with those readathons last year, and so I decided to do it again this year. I managed to complete all 4 prompts for Team Lit for blackathon. All of them. I did it. I did what I set out to do. For our Valentine's, I haven't quite tallied up all of the prompts that I hit, but I did hit that main bingo that I wanted to. I will have the bingo board over here for your perusal, so you can see how well I did at blacking out all of the book-related prompts. I didn't really try for any of the non-book-related prompts except for the one in the middle, because I just couldn't be bothered. Oh well. So now that you know how I did with the readathons, let's talk about my stats for the month of February. In February, I ended up reading 14 books in total. That came out to 5,110 pages. As far as the format that I read them in, I read 7 audiobooks, 3 physical books, 3 graphic novels, and then I had 1 book that I read partly as a physical book and partly as audiobook. When it comes down to the age category, I ended up reading 10 young adult books and 4 adult books. As far as the genre breakdown goes, I read 7 contemporary books, 2 fantasy books, 2 thrillers, 2 historical fiction, and 1 horror. My ratings are where things get a little bit dicey. I read 5 5-star books, 3 4-star books, and then 6 3-star books. And then 3 of them came from books that I already owned, 1 was an art, and then 10 of the books I read were from the library, saving me a total of $174.87. My favorite book of the month was King of Crows by Libba Bray, and my least favorite book of the month was The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. So the first book that I ended up reading was one of my TBR jar picks, and that was Looking for Alaska by John Green. Looking for Alaska is about Miles. He goes off to a boarding school in Alabama to seek the great perhaps. There, he ends up involved in a friendship group, lots of pranks, and ends up suffering his first heartbreak. This was kind of a mixed bag. I knew going into it that there were going to be elements that I liked and elements that I didn't like. I'd already been spoiled for the big thing that happens in this book, so I was able to brace myself. It wasn't a complete and total, it didn't wreck me, it didn't make me mad, it didn't make me hate the book. So the things that I enjoyed in this novel were the friendship dynamics. They had such a cute, wonderful, wholesome friendship that I liked where it was going, even though I knew, but at the same time, it was really fun to watch them, to see them interact, to see male-female friendships being treated as more than just romantic lead up, like the prelude to a romance. It was part that, but part not that. I also really liked the way that John Green explores how hard it is to know people, how you really can't know what someone is thinking unless they tell you. So there's just so much going into like grief and mental health and just the aftermath of things after they happened. I can't tell you what things they are because spoiler. I also really liked Alaska as a character. She was just kind of angry at the world, and I really related to why she was angry and the things that were going on. I saw it. I felt it in my soul. I understood. So as for the things that I didn't particularly like, the romance was not my favorite by a long shot, by so far. I also, like, they were talking about this grand final prank that they were going to do, and I thought it was kind of a lame prank. I just was like, why was this the magnum opus prank? There were pranks done earlier in the novel that I felt like were much bigger, better ways to go out than what they do at the end. And then the final thing is, it's a sad book. I don't like sad books, but I did read it knowing it was a sad book, so it was okay. It was alright. I like some of the things it explores. It definitely is his weakest novel. I think that later novels are much better, especially when it comes to female representation and the things that he kind of covers and explores. He's written better stuff. So the next book that I picked up was one that is on my physical TBR. I needed an audiobook. I was like, hey, let's see what we've got on the physical TBR. I felt like reading a thriller, and so I read The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. The Girl on the Train is an adult thriller. It is about Rachel. She ends up witnessing something as her train goes by a house one afternoon. When one of the people involved ends up missing, she goes to the police thinking that she has information, not knowing that she is making herself one of the key suspects in this investigation. So as you might remember from the beginning of the video, this is my least favorite book. It wasn't necessarily a bad book. I did like the mystery. It got me hooked despite the fact that I hated all of the characters. The mystery was enough to keep me going, okay, but I need to know what the frack happened. And I really just did not connect with this book. All of the characters were stupid and terrible. I was like, there's not one single person in this book that I am rooting for. Like, the one person that I was rooting for just ended up being a mistake, okay? A huge, massive mistake. Like, what? What was I thinking? But I am glad I read it. It was an interesting thriller. I can now unhaul it. While we are on the subject of characters that I could have cared less about, let's talk about Death Note Volume 2 by Tsugumi. It's backwards. The story is by Tsugumi Oba and the art is by Takeshi Obata. Death Note is about Light Yagami, who ends up finding a death god's notebook. He discovers that if you write a human's name in said death note, that human will die, and he takes it upon himself to rid the world of evil. Here's the thing about Death Note. It is by far a better mystery than The Girl on the Train. It has kept me hooked. I'm not mad about the mystery. I think it is fantastic. The twists are what saved this novel. At both kind of like the halfway mark, which would have been the end of volume 3, and the end, there were two kind of massive twists that I was like, oh, okay, so this is how we're going to keep this series going. I can actually find the very moment. Yeah, I was right here, and I was like, I don't know that I'm going to keep going after I finish this volume in this series, and then the twists happened, and I was like, okay. I could get on with this. We'll see. We'll give it another volume at least. I do like the places and the things that they are finding to explore and go into with this story. There's a lot talking about morality and what is right and wrong. There's that. Like, there's who gets to play God. Like, is there, like, the boundaries that are being pushed in this graphic novel, I am enjoying, I think are really interesting and good. They're questions that I am invested in, so I'm going to continue reading the series. However, there are a few things about this that I wasn't the biggest fan of. I don't care about the characters. I think they're all idiots. They're supposed to be the smartest. These two main characters are supposed to be super smart, and yet there were places in this that I'm like, are you really that smart? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something, but I'm just like, this is dumb. The other thing is that there was a lot, like, in that first bit that it started to feel like filler. It got better once we got to the halfway part, but that first volume, like what would have been volume 3, ended up feeling a lot like, okay, we're just kind of doing filler episodes so we can get further in the story. And I was like, there were only like smidgens, little pieces that were necessary to the plot. And I was just like, what? How are we going to stretch? Because I know how many there are like 6 of these, and I was like, how are we going to stretch this particular plot for 4 more volumes? That's math. 4 more volumes. So, anyways, note to anyone who's reading this, this is not one that you want to be reading when you are standing in line waiting for food with people who can look over your shoulder. I'm just gonna say, there's like at the very beginning, there's a place where I was like, oh, people are gonna be wondering what I'm reading. Oops. The next book that I finished was On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. On the Come Up is a YA contemporary about Brie. Brie wants to be a rap superstar just like her deceased father. However, when a song that she has written about an encounter with the security at her school goes viral, she has to grapple with the effect of her words. So Angie Thomas has hit it out of the park yet again. I just love her books. She just is so good at the writing thing. She just is. She is a master at crafting characters. I absolutely adore it. That's one of the things I liked. I also really enjoyed, like, Angie Thomas does a really good job at writing parents and writing family dynamics, because Brie's mom, oh my goodness, there were situations where I think in so many, like, normal contemporary teen novels, Brie's mom would not have been on her side, and yet Brie's mom knows what's up in this novel. She is on Brie's side. She is going to bat for her daughter at the beginning, and I loved being able to see that, because I don't think we see that necessarily when we have those kinds of situations with white authors writing white characters. I'm just gonna come out and say that. And she also writes such great family dynamics. The dynamic between Brie and her brother and her mom was wonderful and realistic, and it made you laugh, and it made you go, ooh, girl, and it made you, like, frustrated at times because, come on, and it just, like, I can't tell you, like, why I was feeling these feelings, because, spoilers, but it just, you went through the whole gamut of feelings that you have when you are in a family, and I think she does that so well. Just looking at this and looking at The Hate You Give, she knows how to write a good, supportive, wonderful family. I also love the fact that Angie Thomas always she just explores things so thoroughly. She always has like a definite like, hey, this is right and this is wrong, but she does such a good job of making you understand why characters make the choices that they make, even when you don't necessarily agree with those choices. I mean, there was one character in this book that I was just like, okay, can you just back off? You need to stop. You need to stop. But like everyone else, I was just like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. So the next book that we need to talk about is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. Get a Life, Chloe Brown is about Chloe Brown. Chloe is very comfortable in her life. She has found ways to deal with her fibromyalgia. She's very set in where she is. However, one day she's nearly hit on her afternoon walk by a reckless driver, and that causes her to question many things about her life. So she makes a list of all of the things that she wants to do in order to get a life. This book took over my life. I spent so many nights staying up way past my bedtime trying to get to various points, and then I'd just be like, we're not getting there anytime soon. I should go to bed. Like, I was up till midnight 3 nights in a row, and I don't usually do that during the weekdays. But I was. I loved this romance. It was so wonderful and fluffy and sweet, and it just was. Okay? It was amazing. It made me so happy. I loved it. I just adored it. I love the fact that they were so good at communication. They still fought. There were still fights, but they were so good at like the fights weren't overblown into something grand and ridiculous, because sometimes like some of the things that they had issues with, those are things that like that's the type of thing that some authors think that can happen 3/4 of the way through the book, and then that is the giant climax that everyone has, the big hurdle that everyone has to get over. Talia Hibbert did so well with pacing this book and finding ways to have the conflicts and to get over them and to have that like just be something that makes the relationship stronger. I also really like the fact that the chronic illness wasn't, it was the everyday experience of chronic illness. It wasn't like this big dramatic thing that was going on. Although there was one part at the beginning, as someone who also has had to deal with chronic illness and parents, I laughed at it because we have two completely different conditions, but I have also been in situations similar to that. So I was like, oh man, I feel this moment right here. I'm American, you're British, but I feel this moment right here. Like, she didn't use big dramatic things happening with Chloe's chronic illness to push the plot along, to make things happen. She really just showed the everyday life with fibromyalgia, which Talia Hibbert does have. There were only a couple things that kind of weren't my favorite, but they're not something that were bad enough for me to be like, oh no, this is only a 4-star book, but like they didn't affect my rating. I do feel like I would have liked for the audience at least to know more details about Red's past earlier, because we do wait till a little bit like real close to the end to really like get into that. I wish that we had more concrete detail. Like, you knew something had happened, but we find out at the same time that Chloe does, and I feel like we could have had a little bit more understanding and detail than he was able to give Chloe, because it felt like very it was a normal conversation that you would have, but it felt like very brush off, and it didn't really answer all of the questions that are raised through his reactions to things and the things that he thinks about. The other thing, there were just certain scenes and certain decisions that were made that I was like, well, I would not make that decision in that place where you are right now, but okay, if that works for you. The next book that I have to talk about is Dreams of Gods and Monsters by Laini Taylor. The Daughter of Smoke and Bone series is about Karou. She seems to be a normal college student in Prague. However, what people don't know is that she works for Brimstone, who is a chimera who collects tea. Brimstone and the assistants in his shop are basically Karou's family. However, one day, the shop goes missing, and all that is left is a handprint burned in the door. I did it, guys. I finally finished this series after having book 2 on my shelf for 8 freaking years. My goodness, guys. 2012. I bought book 2 in 2012 because it was on sale, and I was gonna get the rest of the books, and then I just never did. Whoops. I love this romance. They are a new favorite couple. I absolutely adore them. I'm not sure if they are like OTP status, like the top OTP status. They're not on that like top 10 list, but they are really, really fun, and I enjoyed them, and I loved them, and it was wonderful and sweet, and I was very worried there at the end. Oh boy. Like, things happened, and then I was like, wait, this is too easy, and then it wasn't that easy. It's a whole thing. I also felt like this really did keep the tension pretty well. Like, there's a lot that's going on, and there's not a lot of progress happening all of the time, but they're able to keep tension between the characters, and the fact that, like, we need to do something, but we're not entirely sure what the right move is. They were able to keep that in there pretty well. She was able to do a lot with like having little things come up, and then having slightly larger things come up, but like not like being ridiculous about it. Does that make sense? Like it wasn't all these big ridiculous tasks they were having to, it was just like roadblocks kept happening. I enjoyed that. One of the frustrations that I had in Days of Blood of Starlight, I had for like a good half of this novel. Good half. I was just like, really? Really, the ending is what made this 5 stars, because the way that it came together at the very, 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 very end, I was just like, okay. And then, again, another thing that wasn't, like, terrible, not something that was enough to take a star off, that, like, really dimmed my enjoyment, but there was something that came up at the end that I was like, this is a whole other can of worms, and there should have been a 4th book about this. Or we should have brought it in. Like, I feel like there just was a certain thing that happened that I don't mind that it happened. I think it was an interesting twist, and I think it gave more oomph to the ending slightly, but I do feel like we needed to have had that particular moment happen a little bit earlier in the book. The next book that I finished was My Hero Academia, Volume 3 by Kohei Horikoshi. My Hero Academia is about Deku. Deku has dreamed his entire life about being a superhero. However, he does not have a quirk, or superpower as we would call it. The chances of Deku being able to attend the nearby superhero high school look pretty slim until Deku has a run-in with his all-time favorite hero, All Might. And All Might might have a solution to Deku's problem. I love the characters in this novel. They are just so much, well, not all of them. Not all of them. I'm not going to say who I don't love, because that might get me roasted on Twitter by some people. But I'm just going to say, there's a character that I'm just like, I'm not happy with you. Can you leave? However, I love Deku. I love his friends. I love just the weirdness of All Might. What is even going on with that dude? Like, there are so many questions I have. Who names their child All Might? He has to have another name, guys. He has to have another name, okay? He does. This had a better pacing and a better plot structure than I feel Volume 2 did. It was much more cohesive. We wrapped up what was going on at the end of Volume 2, and then we went into a whole new thing. So, like, it kind of has that cliffhanger effect, but you don't feel like you're bouncing around all these random places like I kind of felt in Volume 2. I also just love Deku. He is a sweet little bean, and I love him. He is wonderful. Thank you very much for coming to my TED Talk. So the only things I have to, kind of dimmed this for me was that, number one, the main bad guy that we saw, that it seems to be, he's going to be a recurring bad guy, or at least he's working for a recurring bad guy, which I don't have a problem with that, but like he was not explained very well. Like we didn't know what his powers were until the very end of that particular arc when it was plain stated by another character. I just didn't feel like between Volume 2 and between this volume, we got a good idea. Like I didn't get that. I was still trying to figure out what his power was until it was stated. I don't know if that is because Horikoshi is relying a lot on like the profiles that he puts, because he puts, where is it? Like he puts profiles in here. And so I don't, maybe it was explained in one of those, because I think there was one about him, but like, it should be in the story. Your audience should be able to figure out what's going on, especially if you're going to wait for the entire arc to state it. Like, there should be a way for them to figure out what's going on, and there was just too much going on in that battle for me to, like, his powers really weren't demonstrated in a way that made it clear what they were. The other thing is, this is still a bit of a boys club. Like, we did a little bit better with having female characters in Volume 2, and then there's a scene where I was just like, wow, it's all boys in this whole fight that's going on right now. That feels great! So, anyways, I'm just saying, we need some more girls in here. The next book we have to talk about is Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. The Diviners series is a series about teens who investigate paranormal murders in the 1920s. With each book, they get closer to figuring out who exactly is behind all these paranormal happenings that have been going on in New York City. As they learn more about this mysterious enemy, they also start learning more about their powers and how they got those powers in the first place. So, this book broke me. It's a good pun. I'm gonna keep saying it. This was such a good book, despite the fact that I spent like 90% of it frustrated out of my mind. But it was a good kind of frustration, because it was the kind of frustration that like gets paid off and makes you happy, because I was happy with things that happened at the end. Yes. I just enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the mystery in this one. It was complicated, and it was so well tied to kind of the main theme, the big bad that they are facing down. I felt like it was such a good, like, the way they tied everything together, and then set things up for the next book was just, it was done beautifully, and I enjoyed it. I liked it. I like that she is using the trauma of America's past to create the villain that she creates. Like, the idea that that is the villain, because that's not something that you can take down. That is not something that, like, you can change. It's happened. And the fact that, like, they're having to reckon with that, it hit good while I was reading this, just considering everything that's going on and the fact that we are still dealing with those issues. I also just love the characters in this. I mean, like, I have my two favorites, and I would have liked more of my two favorites, but I enjoyed what was going on. I love these characters. They're so much fun. There's only one that I can't stand, and, like, I'm not going to complain about that, having read the last book now. Between the characters and the plot, nothing stayed too still in this book. I felt like we were continually having to kind of figure things out. We were continually moving forward. Even when, like, for example, the plot wasn't moving forward, I felt like the characters were trying to move forward, and vice versa. Obviously, I just love the romance. I love it so much. This romance is possibly in my top 10 OTPs. Possibly. If I were to rank it, it might pretty high up there. I also just love the parallels that can be drawn between what's going on in this era, between the racism and the bigotry and all the mess that's going on that they're exploring and confronting in this book, and the things you can see. It really makes issues today really stand out very clearly, being like, wait, we were dealing with this in the 1920s and we're still dealing with it 100 years later. What's going on? Why? Why America? Why? The next book that I read was The Opposite of Falling Apart by Micah Good. I am currently working on a more detailed review for this one, but I enjoyed it. It was all right. It was not my favorite thing ever. There were definitely parts that I liked. There were parts that really just gave me those warm, fuzzy feelings. I liked the little romance that they had going. I liked the relationship between the two main characters, because it's very much a novel that is dependent on these two main characters. We see a good amount of side characters, and we get to, like, see how they affect the main characters, but the real story is between these two kids that meet and kind of form this support system with each other and kind of understand. They understand each other in a way that I feel their family doesn't necessarily understand. I really liked the way that Micah Good dug into their psyches and what was going on with them and made it easy to understand. I just love novels where we're digging into what's going on with them and we're going, okay, so this is why they're making these decisions, and you can understand those decisions even if you don't agree with them. However, the ending kind of fell apart for me. I felt like it was very rushed. There were decisions, there were things that happened and choices characters made that felt like just a complete flip from how they had been behaving at the beginning of the novel. It didn't ring as true. I think we needed more time in that final kind of climactic confrontation between the two of them. I think, like, it's not that it didn't make sense, it was that we just didn't get enough insight and the emotion behind the decision being made. I just felt like it needed more time, especially at the very, very end, because you get to the end and you get the resolution of what's going on, and then it's just, it's the end of the book. The end of the book. And I was like, we needed at least one more chapter. We just needed an epilogue. My kingdom for an epilogue. The next book that I have to talk to you guys about is The Promised Neverland by Kaio Shirai and Pasca Dimezu. The Promised Neverland is about Emma, Norman, and Ray. They are the brightest kids at their orphanage. However, one night they discover that there is a very dark secret lurking outside the walls of the safe place they call home. This book was weird. Like, the twist that happens at the end of chapter 1, you're like, what? This is my first horror manga that I've ever read, and okay, wow. However, I do really like the characters in this novel. They're cute, they're sweet, they're 11 years old, and they're trying not to die, so there's that, and you're rooting for them, and they're so, like, smart. It's fun to watch smart kids, I feel like. I don't think it would be fun to be a smart kid, but it's fun to watch them try not to die. I think that the plot twist and the mystery was just not fun, but it's intriguing. You're sitting there on the edge of your seat going, okay, how are they going to get out of this situation? How are they going to fix this? What's going to happen? What are they going to do? Because they're 3 kids against this huge thing that's going on outside of their little orphanage, and you're like, this is a lot bigger than they are, so how are they going to manage to get out of it? I feel like it is a very unique plot, and I thought that was interesting. I thought it was, like, maybe it's not as unique as I think it is, but I do feel like I haven't seen it done in this way before. Like, I've seen lots of stories with children in dire danger, but like, not quite like this. Like, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like it grabbed me and I had to know what happened next. Maybe because I was just a little bit too weirded out by the thing that's going on in this. So the next book we need to talk about is The King of Crows by Libba Bray. I loved this book so much. And I finished it. I think I finished it in like 2 days. I read most of it, or listened to most of it in 2 days, because, whoo boy, it was a ride. It was a ride and a half, but also not perfect. This is one of those where I'm giving it 5 stars because I enjoyed it so much, because there were so many things that I loved about it, but I can see there are definitely things that would not work for everyone. For one thing, I loved the character moments in this book, especially between my two faves. Again, this romance was so worth the wait. I didn't get as much of it as I would have liked in this book. Like, there was a lot of them, but not them together, and I was like, can we have more scenes with together doing things? Banter, give me the banter, please. And it just, there wasn't as much of that as I would have liked. However, what we did get was worth the wait. It was sweet. It was cute. It was over the top in the cheesiest, most wonderful way. Like, it was adorable. It was like a rom-com in the middle of a paranormal horror movie. It also has one of my favorite tropes at the kind of the beginning. It's like somewhere around here. One of my favorite tropes. When a book does this or a show does this, it makes me happy because I am a sucker for it. I just am. I'm not going to say what it is because I feel like you should be left in suspense about whether or not it is actually going to happen before the devil breaks you. I loved it. I also, again, love the way that injustice is highlighted in the plot, especially in this one, because it wasn't just in New York City. We got to see more of America and see more of what happened in the building of America and more of the sins of kind of the colonial mindset that created America. There were a couple of things though that, I mean, I'm not a fan of villains. I don't care about them. Like, I could do books without villains. So the fact that the big bad was kind of easy, like both of the big bads that we had in this, they were pretty easy to defeat. I would have liked a little more. I feel like, not I would have liked, but I feel like we needed a little more time and effort put into defeating them. It just was kind of like we got there and boom, we did the thing and it was done. And I was like, that is not, we could have used less in the middle, because the middle did kind of sit and fester a little bit. There was a lot, especially not necessarily with my people, because I was happy for every single one, but there were a couple places where I was just like, we are spending way too much time in the one specific storyline. We were just spending way too much time not exploring what was going on, but with this character, because they weren't going anywhere. There was nothing happening. And some of it was important, but I didn't think we needed as much surrounding that. Do you understand what I mean? Like, we sat still for a very long time with this set of characters, and it kind of made the plot drag. I feel like if we had kept those characters moving, it would have been much better. There were places in the middle that I was like, we could have done with less of this and more at the end. So just a note. I understand if you're plot driven, you're probably not going to like this as much. If you're character driven and you just want to sit with the characters and be in their heads, you will enjoy this. The next book that I finished was Slay by Brittany Morris. Slay follows Kiera, a teen who has managed to develop an online multiplayer game that celebrates Black culture. It started out as a safe place for her and other Black gamers where they could game without having to worry about being judged for their race. When a murder happens in the real world about things that happened in this game, Kiera's game is in the spotlight and people start to question whether or not it even deserves to exist. So I had so much fun reading this book. It was a little bit of a different world than I'm used to as a contemporary, and she's a gamer, and I love reading books about girls who are doing sciencey things. I'm not really a sciencey person. I mean, I love science, don't get me wrong, but like I'm not the person sitting here doing physics in my head. That just is not me. And then you have Kiera, who has got her own video game thing going on. I loved it. Kiera is so smart and fun, and like she was realistic, and she was pushing boundaries. Oh, it was so much fun to read from her point of view. I also really like the fact that like we have Kiera, and then we get to see the points of view of other people in the game who are playing this game that she has developed. And I really like the idea of Slay. I like the idea of having a game or having a safe space. And I understand some of the problems that arise with that, or people would feel arise with that, but I also feel like it's okay sometimes to curate your space, especially online, to weed out the people that you know are going to harass you and have an issue. and make things difficult for you and pile on stuff. Like, online for a lot of people is the escape, and I think it is okay to curate your space so that you're not having to deal with that. The only thing I didn't really like was I wasn't a big fan of, it's a spoiler. I can't really tell you what I didn't like. But there was no substitution for... I can't tell you what I didn't like because it is a spoiler. It's like a massive spoiler. The twists in this book were like amazing. She really had me thinking that this thing was this one thing and then it wasn't, and I about threw my phone when we got to that part in the audiobook because I didn't know what to do with that reveal. I mean, like, I kind of should have seen it coming, but at the same time, I did not know what to do with that. And yet I know there are people out there that are like that. Also, there was a character that I really wanted to slap. I wanted to slap him. I wanted to sit him down and tell him some things about things that also will spoil things. So I just wanted to have a conversation with this. The next book we need to talk about is Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. Stay With Me is about Yejide, a Nigerian woman who is married to the love of her life. However, when their marriage goes on for years without any children, his relatives start to get concerned. So despite the agreement between Yejide and her husband Akin that they would not be in a polygamous relationship, his relatives show up one day with a woman that they claim is his second wife, and Yejide realizes that if she wants to keep her marriage the way it is, she is going to have to get pregnant. This book was so good. Oh my gosh. It was good. That's so, not fun. I didn't have fun, but this was a ride from start to finish. And it was one of those books that really makes you think. You have to be paying attention to what is going on in this book if you want to really, truly understand it, because there are multiple different timelines going on, but I appreciate it. I really liked how she worked with the multiple different timelines, the levels that she examined people, and like, she didn't just come at it from the, hey, these are toxic expectations of women angle. She also looked at some of the Nigerian toxic expectations of men. She really sat down and looked at how various traditions and attitudes were harming this marriage. Like, it wasn't just that he was in the wrong or she was in the wrong. It was that there was an entire culture and expectation being placed on both of them that was making things more difficult for them. And the way and the ending, my goodness. I also liked the fact that, like, there was, like, this sort of, not byline, but, like, this side plot of, like, the fact that life goes on despite political upheaval, and they were having to deal with the things that were happening because of the different regimes that were being displaced, that came in, all of that stuff. I just loved this book. It was very, very good. It makes you question a lot of things. It was a history lesson. It's not quite old enough to be historical fiction, but it's not entirely, like, it takes place in the 80s and the 90s, so it's not entirely present day. There were a few elements that just didn't quite sit right with me. Like, and I know part of it was a plot point, but I just, like, couldn't get over the fact that this thing happened, and it made me very squicked out. Like, it wasn't anything bad that happened, but it was, depending on, but, like, I wasn't a fan. Like, I understand why what happened. I just didn't like quite the way it happened. Like, I could have gotten behind what was going on, because you know what you do in your marriage is what you do in your marriage. But, like, there were a couple of just things that were added in that I was like, we didn't need this in this plot anywhere. And the final book that I read in the month of February was Royal Holiday by Jasmine Guillory. If you are new to my channel, you might not know that I am a huge Jasmine Guillory fan. I have loved her previous 3 books. I enjoyed this one so much. I loved it. It was very good. It wasn't my favorite. My favorite is still A Proposal, but I had so much fun reading this book. It is really cute and realistic when it comes to the romance. Like, it wasn't some big, grand, it was a lot quieter, I feel, than some of her other plots have been. It wasn't quite as cheesy in that kind of brand new love kind of way. It was just very much 2 older people kind of finding someone that they were compatible with and someone they enjoyed being around, and then seeing what happened there. And I also really enjoyed the fact that this was dealing with a woman who was in her 50s, because I know a lot of romance is women in their 20s and their 30s and maybe their 40s, and I don't think there's a lot that's like 50s and above. I don't think we really have that many that are geared towards that audience, especially considering that I know a lot of that audience reads stuff like this. So I thought that was cute. I thought it was sweet. It was a good, wholesome thing that happened. The conflict, oh, you saw it coming, and then it, like, the way it was resolved, it was so adorable. The only few things that I had a hard time connecting with the characters. Like, especially, like, Vivian was really weird because she read, especially at the beginning, she read really young to me. She didn't really read to me like someone in their 50s. Not that I know that from personal experience, but like she just read very young to me. And then the other thing was, and maybe this is part of why I didn't feel as connected, I felt like some of the prose was not as evocative. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like she's more descriptive in, especially when it comes to feelings, in some of her other books, that she was much more like, it just felt like there was a lot more showing, there was a lot more telling than showing when it came to certain scenes and certain things that were happening. And I was like, but can we please dig into this and give me more of it? I want the feelings, guys. That's what I read for. I read for the feelings, the emotions. I do. I literally am the person that sits there while I'm reading, and like my face is making the expressions that the characters are making. It makes reading in public really weird. Does. Still, I really enjoyed it, and I do highly recommend it. I cannot wait for it to come out in paperback so I can add it to my shelf, because it needs to match my other books that I already own. Now that I have told you what I read in February, I need you to tell me what you've read in February. What was your favorite book? What was your least favorite book? I want to hear all about your reading month. How did it go? All that good stuff. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, hit that subscribe button if you're new here. That is it for now, my friends. Happy reading, and I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye!